Hello, my name is Nadine Ulisi, and this presentation will be on fecal microbiota transplant, Food and Drug Administration draft guidance for industry. The purpose of this presentation will be to discuss the current FDA enforcement discretion policy guidelines that seeks to regulate FMT for patients with recurrent Clostridium difficile, C. diff infections. I'll explain the overall health and economic impacts, identify and discuss the gaps within the enforcement discretion policy, and provide recommendations for the FDA to consider prior to finalizing a policy. Microbiomes are a group of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other host germs that live in a particular part of the body. The study of the microbiome has revealed its significant health impacts and has been used to treat multiple gut conditions. FMT is the transfer of stool from a healthy donor to a recipient whose gut has been damaged. A significant public health crisis is the growing number of drug-resistant bacteria, which leads to the overuse of antibiotics. 500,000 people each year are infected by C. diff, and 1 in 6 people will fail the standard therapy of 14 days of vancomycin antibiotics. C. diff infections account for $4.8 billion in excess healthcare spending. FMT research trials have provided over 70% efficacy for the treatment of C. diff. I utilized the policy analytical framework from the CDC and conducted a policy evaluation to evaluate the sufficient evidence exists for effectiveness of FMT in treating refractory C. diff. In addition, the barriers related to FMT, including access and cost, were assessed. A study showed the cost difference between FMT and standard treatment was about $2,000. FMT was found to be cheaper and more effective treatment for treating recurrent C. diff infections. In 1958, the first FMT in the Western Hemisphere was performed. In 2013, the FDA drafted its first draft guidance for industry, which recognized fecal matter as a biological agent and pre-authorized the use of FMT strictly for the use of recurring C. diff infection. The subsequent drafts in 2014 and 2016 focused on obtaining adequate consent, stool product collection, and stool bank distribution. In 2019 and 2020, 2 safety alerts were drafted for the industry, warning about death from FMT and also the possible transmission of COVID-19. In assessing the policies, the gaps that were assessed were creating barriers for equitable access, limiting the number of clinical trials, sufficient research data on long-term effects did not satisfy informed consent parameters, and the policy threatens patient safety. Current guidelines state that consent must note the recipient's awareness of the experimental component of the treatment and potential risk associated with the procedure. One could not fully obtain informed consent for FMT as there are no known long-term risks, as well as the vulnerability state of a patient with recurrent C. diff. Stool collection and distribution. The current guidelines state that utilizing a stool bank for fecal product will be restricted and stool donors must be known. Eliminating stool banks limits the access to FMT for both patients and physicians. Adverse reporting in the current guidelines are not required to be reported. The lack of adverse reports endangers patients who participate in the clinical trials. And lastly, in the absence of guidelines, there have been a market of do-it-yourself FMT. This is a public health crisis and concern because donors are not properly screened, and as seen in 2019, the improper screening of a donor can lead to death. The FDA should consider key points when looking to finalize a policy for FMT. 1, they should provide specificity around informed consent, utilizing best informed consent statutes from state laws. 2, they should continuously revise the draft evidence of efficacy. 3, they should enforce the industry to report adverse reactions, as this will ensure patient safety. In conclusion, policy relies on evidence for its validity. Although the efficacy of FMT remains questionable, it suggests a lot of potential, and the data collected could standardize care for C. diff. As science evolves and revisions to the policy are made, it will be up to public health professionals to ensure that all aspects of patient safety are applied to future policy consideration. Thank you for listening.